I made a recording yesterday about the Daily Wire and got a little pushback from it. Actually got a few private emails, which I did appreciate. I take private emails more seriously than I do public comments, particularly from people who want to be critical. And several of the people who wrote private emails were disappointed that I had spoken against Fred's decision to join the Daily Wire. And they identified themselves as Southern and conservative. And so my immediate response, in my mind at least, this is not what I told all of them, but my response was, my reaction, rather, was, well, I don't think you really know what Southern conservatism means. And second of all, my primary concern has nothing to do with Matt Fred and his show. I wish him all the best, but he is this decision to join the Daily Wire and the Daily Wire itself is the symptom of a larger problem within the so-called conservative movement. Everything that I think about when it comes to culture and society in America comes from an intensely Southern point of view. Very Southern point of view. And in part, what that means is that I despise a culture that is based on wealth, business, and progress. Those are flighty terms. Those are not the things that a traditional culture is made of. And as I said in my previous publication, when we reach a point where we rely upon technology and the internet and social media to tell us what our traditions are, then we've probably already lost them. Traditions are meant to be lived. Traditions are not something that have to be explained every single day on the news broadcasts. If they're not being lived anymore, if they're not at the heartbeat of everyday life, then what you're dealing with is life in the ruins. But what I wanted to do is explain to you what I'm talking about, because I did not know how much drama has been caused on social media by this Fred transition to the Daily Wire. I'm not on X. I was for about 3 or 4 months, a year or two back, but I couldn't stand it. It was too barbaric for me, just way, way too uncivilized. And so I gave that up. And so my wife looked up some of the drama on that platform this evening, and I was astonished at how much attention this decision has garnered, rather. And I don't follow many people at all on Instagram. I have an account there. It's mostly about pipe smoking, etc. Very little about anything else on IG. But I go to the Daily Wire page on Instagram, and it's also full of a massive amount of drama. And so it's important to me that you know that what Fred does with his show is entirely his business, but I'm disappointed in it because I think he would be better off on his own. And I think that what's motivating a lot of this decision is money and influence. I've had a few conversations with Fred. I wouldn't necessarily call him a close friend at all. He's just an acquaintance. But he's doing good work, and he has been doing good work on his own. And my fear is that losing that independence and merging with a large company is going to produce havoc. Because I don't believe in businesses doing that. I believe in very local authority. I believe in keeping things as close to home as possible. That includes your pocketbook. And when you start giving over control to companies through mergers and whatever the case may be, then that's problematic. That's not the type of world that I want to live in. That's not the type of world that my Southern agrarian and Southern conservative sensibilities leads me to respect. But most people probably think that, why talk about the South in this particular context? Well, because when you look at what the Daily Wire is all about, they claim to be a countercultural media outlet. We don't need a countercultural media outlet. Counterculture is a term that the hippies used in the Cultural Revolution of the 60s. We need media outlets, we need education systems that explain real, genuine American culture, not some kind of alternative to it. So I think that's bad wording in the first place. But they are very clear, the Daily Wire is very clear that this is a company. They have millions and millions of dollars involved with this company. And people who are involved with it and who work for them, particularly high-profile hosts, they're going to be making a good living off of it. There's nothing wrong with making a good living. But when you're dealing with topics of extreme religious and cultural significance, you've got to have the freedom to say what you think and what you believe without threat of losing a job. I hope that never happens to anybody on the Daily Wire, but it has. And I don't know anything about Candace Owens. I don't follow these people, but I know she was fired. I didn't even know who Nick Fuentes was until 24 hours ago. And the only reason I know that is because somebody left a comment on one of my video shorts I recently did and called me a groiper. I have never heard that term in my entire life. I'm not up to date on all the modern slang things that are going on in politics. So I looked it up. And I guess because I said that I don't think that this country should support Israel at all costs, that's why they called me a groiper. And by the way, that's a topic for another video, but I very firmly stand behind that statement. I was raised in a Pentecostal Protestant household, and it was very much dispensationalist. It was very much, my granddaddy was heavily influenced by Swaggart and John Hagee. And John Hagee has made millions and millions of dollars off of scaring people into believing that if America don't support Israel, then we're doomed to hell. And that's just simply not true. All of that stuff began in the 1800s, and it has gained traction in sort of a low church, rural American environment. And it's amazing how much it's taken off and how much it has influenced American politics, particularly in the past 25, 30 years. So, no, I think it's very dangerous for this country to be thinking just to have the idea that we need to be spending so much money helping Israel to support itself. Israel should be able to support itself on its own, and I think it can. We need to take care of our own country. We need to close the borders. We don't need to have massive amount of immigrants. And so I'm not some type of leftist in this regard. And by the way, that brings to mind a comment that David Brooks made about a year ago, I guess. And I know a lot of people don't like David Brooks, but I think that his insight on this particular issue regarding American politics was especially important. He made this statement that conservatives who claim to be conservative, they really don't care about identifying and maintaining conservatism. What they care about is being anti-left. And so in some sense, I see the Daily Wire as being an example of that statement. So why do I constantly harp on the American South? Why do I think that it still maintains importance, even within the context of current events? Well, let me quote a little bit from Richard Weaver this evening, if you don't mind. Richard Weaver was a second-generation Southern agrarian. He and M.E. Bradford were probably the key thinkers in the American South from the period from the late 1940s through the early 1990s. And so when we think about why it's important to continue talking about the Southern perspective of American history, American politics, anything regarding America, just listen to what Weaver has to say. And I quote, "The defender of Southern civilization must say that the struggle of the South against the North, however it was spoken of in its day, was implicitly a struggle for ideals which lay behind and perhaps concealed by the bid for independence. Most writers feel that they have demonstrated all that can be hoped for when they have proved that in the eyes of the Southern partisan it was a fight for civil liberties worthy to rank with the battle put up by the colonists." Okay, so let me stop right there. I have often said that. I've often said, and the Confederate founders themselves said, that we are comparing 1861 to 1776. But Weaver goes a step further. He said the Civil War was more important than that. And here we go with Weaver again. "But the issues were profounder than this. It was a battle against pervasive influences which have reduced the modern world to moral impotence." Now, this comes from an essay entitled "The Anatomy of Southern Failure," written in the 1940s and originally submitted to the Swanee Review in 1944. Did you get that last point? The issues were profounder than this. It was a battle against pervasive influences which have reduced the modern world to moral impotence. And here, let me touch on one thing that I take issue with when it comes to Mike Knowles and certain other people on the Daily Wire. They are, in large part, American nationalists. They believe in the Union, that there's one nation under God, indivisible. It is very much divisible. Regional identity matters significantly. And this is why I say that when we have people who are gaining a massive amount of influence over how young Americans understand and identify as conservatives, we need to be a little bit more complex in how we're explaining that issue, explaining those definitions. Conservatism has never seen the United States as some type of national endeavor that's more important than regional differences, regional identities. And at the heart of all this is the Constitution. And at the heart of the Constitution is federalism. What is federalism? It is the notion that the federal government was intended from the very beginning to be very small, very limited. The bulk of the power rests in local authority. Because one of the problems we're dealing with now is pluralism, diversity. Well, the country has always been diverse to some extent, but that diversity has been properly managed by allowing individual states and regional identities to maintain their own way of doing things. One of the worst things that's happened since the American Civil War is this idea that America is homogenized, that we're all supposed to be one and the same thing, that there is such a thing as a unified American people in the aggregate. Patrick Henry, when he read the preamble to the United States Constitution, said, "What is this American people that the preamble is talking about?" There is no American people. There's only the people of the individual states. The 10th Amendment to the Constitution is very clear and uses that same language. All powers, all powers not delegated to the Constitution remain with the people. That is, the people of the several states. If the people in Maine want to allow transgender sports, that's their problem. It's not the problem of us here in Kentucky. If the people in Maine want that to change, they need to vote a new governor into office. The federal government, and I understand that I'm wishy-washy sometimes on this. After Charlie Kirk died, I was very much gung-ho that the federal government needs to do whatever's necessary in order to attack the left. I just don't. That in and of itself goes against my own principles. Goes against my own principles. You will never make this country one people from sea to shining sea. It will never happen. It was never supposed to be that way. Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to John Adams in the last years of those two gentlemen's lives, and Jefferson told Adams that he foresees a day when the country should be divided into 3 or 4 separate confederacies based upon regional culture. And so we're trying to create something that the founders never intended to exist in the first place. So if you don't have regional culture, if you don't have federalism, what you have left is an empire. And so now we have an empire. In the history of empires in Western civilization, it ain't good. So what are the people at the Daily Wire trying to defend? What is their definition of America? What is it, and will it work? And I'm picking on the Daily Wire because that's what's on my mind. But I could also talk about other people. The Daily Signal, what do they got? Victor Davis Hanson? I mean, he's a neocon who don't know his butt from a hole in the ground when it comes to American history. So I want to go back to Weaver for just another minute here. This is profound. Listen to this. This is true now, even as much as it was when Weaver wrote this in the 1940s. This is Weaver. The world of affairs demands a choice of alternatives. And it is a melancholy fact that since the Civil War, the South has not possessed sufficient intellectual freedom to make even a clear-cut conservative choice. So where is it? Where is conservatism anymore? How do we define it in a way that is rooted, that is weathered? Where are our alternatives? This is probably the most important point I want to say in this recording this evening. And here I am quoting again from Weaver. Significant of the philosophical blindness of the South is its failure to see how much of its inheritance is today needed for the healing of the nations. And this is very much true now. I had a guy made a comment on the video I did today and said he was a Southern conservative, and he doesn't understand why I'm criticizing the Daily Wire. Well, I told him, I said, I don't think you understand what that term means. So let me help the boy out a little bit. And let me help y'all who are listening a little bit. Let me start that over again. Pay close attention. Significant of the philosophical blindness of the South is its failure to see how much of its inheritance is today needed for the healing of the nations. This is not a matter of restoring the old South. And a little context here. How many people have criticized me for saying that I want to restore the old South? I want to revive the 1860s Confederacy. Yeah, I think the South was right in seceding from the Union. But I'm not here to tell you that we need to revive the 1860s Confederacy. I'm here to tell you exactly what Weaver is articulating here. So here we go with Weaver again. Here we go. This is not a matter of restoring the old South, which is a false conception of the issues. It is rather a matter of perceiving that its education and its traditions produced a moral type which needs to be recreated. Its allegiance to a spiritual ideal, sometimes admired as quaint, but more often scoffed at as barbaric or backward, emerges as the one power which may defeat the destruction of belief by scientific materialism and the corruption of society by money. Why am I pissed off that somebody like Matt Fradd would give up what he was building for the sake of merging with somebody who's going to control him? Is because he's doing it probably in part, not entirely, because of money. When you're dealing with religious and cultural issues, you do not put yourself in a situation where your voice has to be told what to say and what not to say because of company policy. Let me go back to that again. This is all just so good. My God, this is good stuff. The South. Why do we continue talking about the South? No other region in American history has this culture. No other history, no other region of America has the deep-rooted religiosity and spirituality, the idea of the old gentleman, the idea of chivalry, a man of integrity. No other region has this. We're not talking about the image of the hard-working cowboy out west here. We're not talking about the image of the New England Puritan, of the transcendentalist. We're speaking of the Southern gentleman, what that image means and why it was so important to this country at one point in its history. Let me repeat that sentence again. The South's allegiance to a spiritual ideal, sometimes admired as quaint, but more often scoffed at as barbaric or backward, emerges as the one power which may defeat the destruction of belief by scientific materialism and the corruption of society by money. Flannery O'Connor said it. Walker Percy said it. Both wonderful Catholic writers. How many other people do I need to quote from to get others to recognize that what I'm saying is not simply me? This is a Southern tradition. This is real Southern conservatism. This is American identity at its finest. And yet, people are being persuaded that conservatism means MAGA and Donald Trump, and MAGA is going to save the country, and tomorrow is going to be the golden age, the best chapter in American history. Hogwash. I've seen no evidence that we're not still twirling the drain morally. And people are referencing the past 10 years. Well, things have changed a lot in the past 10 years because of the Daily Wire. Really? Where? Where's the evidence? Is there any evidence that people in their 20s now are more religious than the millennial generation? No. The evidence that I'm seeing says that maybe 15 to 20% of people born since the year 2000 are religiously oriented at all. And that's within American society. I bet it's far less in Europe. You can't turn a culture around through an organization called Turning Point. That's not how organizations and institutions, college campuses, that's not what turns a culture around. You have to go back to something very old, very weathered. You have to learn from the older generations, not become engrossed with a political movement that you think is going to save the culture. The politics reflects the culture. Politics do not save the culture. The culture is reflected in the politics. So I think we've got it back asswards. We're not thinking correctly when we're thinking about how to truly save America. Okay, well, then you got to ask a lot of questions. What is challenging America? Well, it's not anything new, I'll tell you that. It's not anything new. I mean, we Southerners have been trying to preserve a traditional understanding of America for a very, very long period of time. And yet people think we're idiots. We don't know what we're talking about. Our contribution to American politics is somehow insignificant. Why? Because of slavery, because of racism. Well, I addressed those two issues a week or two back in a separate recording, so I would encourage you to go listen to that. I don't know, I'm not hopeful. I know that many people are. I know that many people are measuring the success of whatever you call conservatism in 2025. They're measuring it through the popularity of content creators. That is not enough. It's not enough. I think Pope Leo XIV said something pretty profound this week, something to the effect that the algorithm does not determine our future. Because I applaud him for questioning artificial intelligence, questioning the advance of technology and machines into every teeny aspect of our life. But I'm not as hopeful as some other people are. I mean, I've been criticized this week for being pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic about my faith. I'm optimistic about that. I am ready to do whatever God wants me to do while I'm still on this earth, and I'm ready to go, ready to leave. I don't anticipate seeing much cultural change over the course of my lifetime, but maybe my children will see it. Because the country is motivated by a definition of America that I don't recognize anymore. But I agree with General Wade Hampton. The United States died in 1865. That's enough of blabbering for this evening. More Annan. This is Alan Harrelson with the Pipe Cottage. Thank you for stopping by.